Hey YouTube, this is Nick from Curvebreakers. I'm here today to talk about the SAT versus the ACT. So in this video, I'm going to break down the differences between the SAT and the ACT. And I'm going to do that so you as a student can make a determination as to which test is better for you. At the end of this video, I'm going to give you my opinion as to which test is better and how you can make that determination. Everyone knows, huge decision in the college process, should I take the SAT or should I take the ACT? A lot of that is going to be dictated by your own individual skills, your scholastic achievement in certain areas, and a variety of other factors. If you like the content of this video, hit the subscribe down below. Leave us a comment. You want to ask a question about SAT versus ACT, we're going to be answering those. So feel free to leave a comment, but let's get into it. What's the number one difference and decider between the SAT and the ACT? Time management, right? Time management is crucial on both tests, but particularly on the ACT, you just have very little time per question. For example, on the reading comp section of the ACT, you have 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage to complete about 10 questions. On the SAT, on the other hand, for a similar task, you have approximately, or exactly, 13 minutes per passage. That's a huge difference, right? Some students who may call themselves quote-unquote slow readers may feel that 8 minutes and 45 seconds is not enough time. I hate that term, by the way, slow readers. Anyone can speed up their reading speed or use strategies to kind of get through the passage a little bit better. So if you feel like you're in that boat, don't get discouraged. But at the end of the day, some students may feel much more comfortable with the SAT timing as opposed to the ACT timing. A little bit more about time management. On the SAT, you have ample time for math questions. So you actually have more than a minute per question on the math of the SAT. On the ACT, on the other hand, you have 1 minute per question. You have 60 minutes to do 60 questions. Now the problem with that is that if you start falling behind, and this is the one of the major issues with the ACT, if you start falling behind, it's very difficult to then catch up on the math because the questions kind of get a little bit harder as you go along. So they start off pretty easy and straightforward, and then they continue to get harder. So if you fall behind on time, kind of tough to get caught back up. That's a big reason why a lot of students feel very uncomfortable during the ACT, and that's because the time is constant pressure and feels somewhat crushing to many students. Obviously, that's not something that a prepared student would feel, but at the end of the day, if you do feel that way, you're not alone, and you're in a boat with many other students, hopefully, who will all overcome that with a proper study plan and practice schedule. So that would be number one factor, whether you'd want to choose the SAT or the ACT. Factor number two would basically be your math proficiency. The math sections on both of these tests are very different. Essentially, on the SAT, you have section 3, which is math without a calculator, and you have section 4, which is math with a calculator. The SAT math is particularly focused on algebra and algebra 2. So if factoring isn't one of your strengths, that's going to be difficult. On the ACT, you're looking at more geometry, trig. You have a lot of triangles, circles, different angles. Most students feel that if their geometry and trig is strong, they're going to feel more comfortable with the ACT. So if you feel more comfortable in algebra and algebra 2, you might like the SAT better, and if you feel more comfortable in geometry trig, you might like the ACT better. That's a huge decision maker and a huge part of the test. The other kicker is that on the SAT, math is actually 50% of your score, whereas on the ACT, math is only 25% of your score. So if you're a really strong math student and strong algebra student, you're going to want to look at the SAT. And if you're a stronger geometry student, or maybe you don't feel like you're a strong math student, then you're probably going to want to move towards the ACT. The next big difference is the science component. So science is an actual section on the ACT. So the fourth section of the ACT is actually science. I sigh because there's really not a lot of scientific knowledge required on the test. Do you need to know some basic stuff about cells and pH and other things? Probably that would be useful, but at the end of the day, the science section really just isn't a very important test of your scientific knowledge. What it is a test of is your reading and analysis skills. So can you read graphs? Can you read charts? Can you read a passage about a scientific topic and understand a study and then answer questions about it? Now, since that's only on the ACT, if that's something that you excel at, that's going to be a huge boost to your ACT score. Whereas if you absolutely hate that section, which many students do, then you might want to look more towards SAT. So with that in mind, if you do take that section, you do it in a diagnostic test, you take the real ACT, and you do really well in it, that's a reason to continue to study for the ACT. And if you really hated it and do terribly on it, maybe you want to move that to the side and move much more towards the SAT, where you want it to deal with that. Let's talk a little about the English section of both tests. The English section on the SAT and ACT, very, very similar. And that's awesome, because if you happen to be studying for one test or the other, it really kind of correlates very well. The only difference is really the time management component, but other than that, of course, on the ACT, you're going to have less time, as we know. But generally speaking, the questions are pretty similar. I mean, there are some differences. You want to study grammar rules, and you want to make sure that you have sound understanding of the exam. But in terms of the differences between the two tests, many people feel those two sections are extremely similar. So that's not something to really worry about in your analysis. Obviously, if there is some drastic difference between your performance on the two, that's something to think about. But at the end of the day, most students perform pretty similarly on the English sections of both tests. One of the other really important components is that these tests have a very distinct feel. The SAT has a feel, and the ACT has a feel. So the ACT is more of an achievement test. They're testing your knowledge. Did you learn stuff in school? Do you remember formulas, grammar rules, stuff like that? Especially on the math section, many of the questions are extremely straightforward. So if you know the grammar rule, if you know the formula on the math section, you're going to be able to answer the question pretty easily. There's not a lot of tricks, there's not a lot of traps. I mean, some, but not to an extreme degree. Whereas on the SAT, that's more of an aptitude test. People like to compare it more to an IQ test. I disagree that it's that evil, but at the end of the day, there is a level of skill involved in the SAT that you might have more difficulty with certain questions on the SAT as opposed to the ACT. For example, some of the math questions might be extremely multi-step. You might have 4 or 5 steps to complete. You might have to unpack a lot of information, and you might really have to break things down before you get to the core of the question. Okay, well, after I do this, 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 and this, now I realize that it's an area of a circle problem. That a lot of students find difficult about the SAT. The other thing is the SAT is essentially a Common Core exam. So on the reading portion, you have evidence-based questions that you just don't have on the ACT. Those questions can be either a source of frustration or something that students feel is really easy for them. It kind of depends on the person. The thing with that is what you're asked to do is, after you answer a reading comp question such as, what is the main point of this passage, you're then going to be presented with examples of where that answer came from in the passage. So you're asked to match the evidence to the correct answer. That's kind of 2 questions in one. So some students feel that is an opportunity to get 2 questions correct, and others feel it's an opportunity maybe to get 2 questions wrong. So some students may not like the SAT for that, and others may love it. Everyone has in their mind ingrained the idea of an SAT question. An SAT question, quote unquote, is a question that is difficult and tricky and convoluted and just it's made to disrupt you as a student, like make you think that something's wrong. Like, am I missing something? Is this too easy? Is it too hard? That is something that the SAT presents to a lot of students. Now, that doesn't have to be the case if you're prepared to understand that the questions all have a definitive answer and that it's usually not that hard to find. But that's kind of a common feeling that students have. I think one way to combat that would be to look towards the ACT. If you really struggle with the convoluted, tricky nature of the SAT, the ACT, once again, is going to be extremely, more straightforward. A lot of students say when they come out of a practice ACT that I found that easy. I really didn't think it was that difficult, whereas on the SAT, I felt like I kind of struggled. And, that's another, really valid reason to think about SAT versus ACT. Other students kind of find the challenge intriguing. right? The SAT is a little bit more challenging for some students, and they like that if they're, maybe high achieving or they're shooting for a high score. So, that's another valid reason to think about the difference between the SAT and the ACT. Let's talk a little bit about the scoring, because that's another component that is really going to affect, your decision. One of the advantages of taking the ACT is that the ACT actually rounds your score up. What you do on the ACT is you take your 4 sections out of 36, you average those together, and you could get a decimal, right? You could get a 29.5. An advantage of the ACT was that would then be rounded up to a 30, which is adding points to your score, whereas on the SAT, that's not going to happen because there is no averaging and there are no decimal point scores. So, albeit a very small advantage for the ACT, it can benefit some students who are, say, looking for a scholarship or need a certain score for a sports coach or a recruited athlete. There's a lot of situations where that can be beneficial. So that's just something to think about, in your decision. I wouldn't say that's a huge factor, but it's definitely something to take into consideration and evaluate before you make that kind of really important decision. I think obviously what we're looking for at the end of this video is an answer as to what's better, the SAT or the ACT. My opinion is that for a student who's strong in math, they're probably going to be better suited for the SAT. And if a student is weaker in math and stronger in ELA, they're probably going to be better suited for the ACT. The caveat for that would be students that struggle with time management are probably not going to be well suited for the ACT. So there's kind of a lot of permutations there, right? If you're a strong math student, but you struggle with time, you're most definitely going to be an SAT student. And if you're a weak math student and you're good with time, then you're probably going to be better suited for the ACT. The problem is there's a lot of people that fall in between those, right? There's a lot of options there, and there's different pieces of the exam that you could be awesome at or not awesome at, and that could greatly dictate your score. At the end of the day, I think the answer to the question, what's better, the SAT or the ACT, is what's better for you as a student. You should look at yourself and take a diagnostic exam of both. That's something that you can do free online, by downloading resources from the College Board and the ACT, and you can sit down, time yourself, do both exams, and compare. There's something called a concordance table, which is essentially a score comparison between an SAT score and an ACT score. So what you'd want to do is take both tests under time conditions and then compare the two and see obviously which one is better, and also evaluate your own perspective. What did you think of these tests? Was the ACT difficult? Did you find it pleasurable in some aspect? Was it super frustrating? You have to feel it out for yourself as to what you think and what you felt during the exam. So the real answer is that either test can be really great for an individual student, but at the end of the day, you want to look within yourself to find that answer. One thing I would say is that I find for all students, making this decision, SAT versus ACT, is actually a source of comfort. Once you say to yourself, I'm an ACT person or I'm an SAT person, you kind of push the other test aside and you study for one of the exams, you relieve a lot of the pressure on yourself, right? You no longer have 2 exams on the table, which who wants to take, 7 standardized tests? If you're planning on taking each test a few times, it just becomes a never-ending process. We want our students here to, you gotta be kidding me. Anyways, we want our students to enjoy the process as much as possible and not be stressed out about it. So part of your decision between the 2 tests is which one is going to be less stressful for me, which one is going to make my life a little bit easier. If I feel like I'm going to be more successful on the SAT or the ACT, making that decision can actually make me even more successful on the exam because I have less to worry about. I guess final thought would be, when I was in high school, and it's a few years ago, there wasn't really this kind of determination, right? You just took whatever test the other kids in your school took, and that was based on your region in the country where you lived. I happen to be from New York. People in New York take the SAT. That's what I took. That's not how it has to be. what you should do is take the time to investigate both tests, take a diagnostic exam. You definitely don't have to sit for the real exam to figure this out, and really try to, save yourself a lot of time, stress, anxiety, and frankly money. Wasting time on a test that's not good for you. So the moral of the story, I think, and the conclusion is that picking the right test for you is extremely important, and the right test for you can be either test based on your skills. So utilizing that information, go out, challenge the SAT or the ACT, kill it, destroy it, just decimate the test. That's what we're all about, deconstruct and destroying these tests. Thank you for watching this video. We're going to be dropping many more of these in the near future, discussing topics about the SAT, ACT, and college process. Leave a comment, leave a question. I'm happy to answer. We're going to be here to help you the rest of the way. So, let's keep this going, and hit that subscribe button so you keep getting this awesome content and we can interact. All right, thanks guys. Peace.